Center works to improve the experience of the mikveh and promote the spiritual, emotional, and physical health of Jewish women and families, and provides intimacy education for different stages of marriage. I just wanted to introduce Dr. Naomi Grummet, who is the director of the Eden Center, to also say a few words before I explain the way the evening's going to work.
So I'll just say quickly that I'm very happy to see everybody who's on and everybody who is watching without their videos on. We're very happy that you're here. And as Judith said, our mission is to help improve the mikveh experience, but also what happens after, our health as couples and as Jewish families, whether it's physical health, emotional health, intimate health, or spiritual health. And it ties in so well that we're doing this week. The parsha talks about building a Mishkan. So Bnei Israel came forward and gave toward that. But building a Mishkan is how we bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence into the world. And intimacy is very similar, right? Two people get together, their intimate lives actually brings Kedusha into the world today. And our Mishkan Ma'at of our home is what welcomes that. And so it's really my pleasure to be having this series and to thank Dr. Judith Fogel, Dr. David Ribner, Lizzie Rubin, and Jody Waxpress, who Judith will tell you all of their credentials in a minute, but to thank you so much for being part of this and for making this series possible and really putting so much of yourselves into bringing the Kedusha into families and the normalcy into families and happy, intimate lives. And I want to invite everybody. I'm very happy that so many people could participate and express interest in participating. And we're thrilled to bring this to the public free of charge, but we definitely are going to invite you to also donate to the Eden Center, because the Eden Center works with your generosity, and that's how we're able to make programs happen. So I'm going to put a link in for you to do that. And in the meantime, Judith, take it away.
Thank you. Tonight we will, let me explain a little bit about the evening. Tonight we will be addressing questions that we have received from you, our audience. People beforehand have written in questions. We also would welcome any questions throughout the evening to be directed to Dr. Naomi Grummet. You could privately message her and she will pass on more of the questions to me. So feel free to do so. We are hoping that these answers will illuminate answers not just to the individuals who ask the questions, but also give us better answers to the community at large. I would like to start with a disclaimer. The therapists in tonight's webinar are all from, and they will be sharing suggestions in that context. With regards to personal practice, you have to speak to your halachic authority if you have any questions. At the end of the evening, we will display the panelists' phone numbers and emails. If you would like to speak to any of the panelists further, they would be happy to do so. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Dr. Judith Fogel, Yoetzet Halacha. I have a PhD in sexology. I'm a sexuality counselor, and I'm the program director for the training of the Madrichot Kalot at the Eden Center. And I'm an experienced college teacher myself. Tonight, we are happy to have with us, first of all, Dr. David Ribner. He is the founder and director of the sex therapy program at Bar Ilan University. He's a certified sex therapist in Israel and the US, and is in private practice as a sex and marital therapist in Jerusalem for decades. He has authored 2 books on the subject, of which his most recent released this year, co-authored with Tali Rosenbaum, I Am for My Beloved. We also have here Lizzie Rubin. She's an individual couples and sex therapist with special training in abuse, postpartum depression, pre-weds, and newlyweds. She directs the Eden Center's mikveh attendant course programming in Israel and abroad. We also have, thank you, Lizzie. We also have Jody Waxpress. Jody Waxpress is the founder of the Oasis Center and specializes in marriage and family therapy and couples and sex therapy. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in clinical sexology. So I'm so happy to have all the panelists here. I will start off with the first question. Once again, just a reminder for those just getting on right now, if you have any questions, you can direct them to Dr. Naomi Grummett in a private message, and she will pass them on to me. Let's start with the first question that we received. Also, I've changed just to make sure that everything is for the spouse. So you'll see some of the language just to be appropriate. Number one, I love my spouse and I want to be intimate, but with all that's going on and the general level of exhaustion between work, having children at home, and all the additional house tasks, I just don't even know what I want anymore. How do I clarify for myself my own sexpectations? So that was a cute one that we got that used the actual word of this tonight's evening, sexpectations. So we definitely need a definition of that one, and also to answer the question that someone asked. So Dr. Ribner, would you be able to address this one first?
I will certainly begin the comments on this and look forward to having subsequent comments from my colleagues. Let me just, before we start, make sure that we're all clear in terms of language. We will be talking this evening about sex, and we will be talking about physical intimacy. We are not necessarily directing that exclusively at sexual intercourse. We are talking about any kind of physical touch that will enable people to feel connected as couples are comfortable in doing, or at least we hope they are comfortable in doing that. That could be anything from a tap on the shoulder, a caress on one's cheek, all the way to including sexual intercourse and perhaps other behaviors as well. So when we use the language of sexuality, we use the language of physical intimacy, we are including a variety of options. And perhaps as we move along here, we will begin to specify where we think some of those may be more relevant. With regard to this question specifically, I think that one of the issues that becomes very difficult, particularly during times of stress, like Corona. And stress can also be something that's part of the natural world. Some of my colleagues, some of my family members were prepared to send their children back to school here and in the States. And of course, the weather interfered with that. So the kids are home for another day or another 2 days or whatever. Those are all stressors. And I think what happens in this question is that there is a sense of desire to maintain a level of physical intimacy, but it becomes very much confused in the context of all of the issues that people are dealing with on their day-to-day lives today. And part of this, the ability to sort of wend one's way out of this with some clarity, is to have a better sense of what one's inner states are. If you're feeling a number of emotions at one time, it may be difficult and complex to be able to focus on one particular emotion, like desire, and keep it unentitled from the other kinds of emotions that we may be feeling. So I think one of the tasks of whoever is asking this question is to be able to create some individual clarity with oneself about what are these feelings and where in that broad group of intertwined emotions is desire still there, and what does it mean to that person? It's a matter of really examining one's inner states, if you can, and trying to have some sense of what is it that's being influenced in terms of, yes, wanting desire, what kind of physical connection one wants, and have some clarity with regard to that. Second point is that, and this is something that you will be hearing from us throughout the evening, which there is no substitute for communication between these two people who make up this couple. Confusion that one person may be feeling may in fact very much be paralleled about the confusion that both members of this couple are feeling. And the ability to be able to share that goes a long way with reducing some of the stress here and allowing for, again, a specificity about the kinds of physical touch, the kinds of whatever kind of emotion that's going to be accompanied that physical touch, allow that to be part of one's life without feeling that it's going to cause undue stress. And just the one final point I will make here before I turn this over to my colleagues is that sometimes it's a good idea to go back and start from the beginning. In other words, couples that have been married for a while and have developed a certain level of sexual rapport a sense of what the sexual expectations are, the sexual scripts that work for them, they don't need to necessarily start from there. And sometimes it's maybe just more gentle and more easy on the nerves to go back and start from where they were before, with just some gentle touch. Nothing that requires particular effort, nothing that requires any energy level that may be beyond what people can manage with each other at the end of very close and very tense experiences in the family environment. And going back and starting from the beginning doesn't necessarily mean it's regressive. It means that you're going back to something that's certain. You're going back to something that you know at one time was acceptable to both people, felt good, and again, did not require anyone to go beyond what their level of comfort is. And I would suggest that that may be a very nice place to start for people who are looking for some kind of clarity with regard to reconnecting physically in a time which is extraordinarily difficult.
I think that to add to what Dr. Ribner is saying in terms of what we expect of ourselves and what we expect of our relationship, in terms of our sexuality and our, to define the word sexpectations is really what we expect of our sexuality, what our sexual expectations are of ourselves, of our spouse, and of our relationship. And a lot of things nowadays have become really very, very confusing. Like Dr. Ribner mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, and we know in times of trauma. And when I use the word trauma, I don't just mean major traumas. I also mean what we call small t traumas, which are things that are difficult and ongoing. And we can say, oh, we can handle this, and 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 it becomes accumulative. And what we do know about times of big T and small t trauma is that time gets very confusing. And, I know I've had these conversations with my friends and my clients and my colleagues. We don't know what day it is. It's all the memes that are coming up. No one knows what day it is. It always seems to be Shabbos again, or planning for Shabbos, or time to, and when it comes to a sexual routine, what we're used to in terms of a sexual routine, whether it's based on the laws of Tarat Mishpacha, if the woman is menstruating every month, or if she's has been double packing or triple packing because of concerns about corona, we get very confused with our timing, and a lot of that can affect our sexual consistency. And every once in a while, it's important to sort of check in and say, well, what do I feel like? It doesn't matter so much what today is, but what am I feeling? Am I feeling that I would like some sexual intimacy? Ask my spouse, what are they feeling? And checking in, because we get very confused. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting very confused these days about what's going on, and just taking a pause and recognizing that our timelines have sort of been jumbled up, and we need to make an extra effort to recognize the importance of our sexual relationships and our intimacy with our spouses, and make time to sort of say, I'm getting caught up with all of the things, and this needs to be one of them too.
Oh, thank you, Jody. I'm just gonna get in there and just say that I think what this question is just all really about Corona, and that we don't have a map to how to deal with our kids and the levels of exhaustion and what's going on in the house and the small spaces that we're sharing, and there isn't much going out. So I think that we have to just validate that Corona has really a whole new story, and how does it come out in the bedroom? So I just wanted to say that we may live in small spaces. I mean, even if we're just staying in the house under lockdown, or we can't go, very, very far. But in our brains, we have a lot of space. And I think that when people have expectations, they can also talk to their spouse and tell them about maybe some fantasies and maybe some things that they can do that might make them feel like that the space is not so small. That's one idea. And the second idea is that in this question, what I like about this question is that this is a couple that love each other, and they want to be close and they want to be connected. It's just really hard. I just want to add that there are also different stages to life. And everybody has different expectations. When people are younger and they have less kids, their expectations of being together might be different than when they have a bigger family or when they get older. And I think, like David said, the communication is the key. We need to be able to keep talking to our spouses about how we feel about things and what can we do about it, and being honest and open with each other so that we can make this story bigger and not so like feeling so crowded.
Thank you. It's interesting that the next question is also touching on the same themes. I think that there's a theme that's coming up because it starts off by saying, hi, I'm absolutely exhausted at the end of the day, which is similar to the one that was previous. I'm noticing that this corona is really hitting home for everyone, causing a lot of exhaustion. I'm at home trying to work and my kids are at home on Zoom all day long. I make up the hours that I miss at work at night. My spouse is out all day long working, and when he comes home, I have no energy for any intimacy. Our sex life is practically non-existent because of the stress. What can we do? Is this our new normal? So I think this is also a similar question, but touches on the same point. Lizzie, do you want to start that one off?
Sure, I like this question. First of all, that's what it says on the ad that we're going to talk about, where he said we're going to talk about, consent and obligation. And when you write here, is this our new normal? I just want to shout out and say, no, this is not our new normal. We're at the beginning to see the end of the light of the tunnel, and we're hoping that we're going to get out of this as soon as possible. But having said that, obligatory sex, what is that? Sometimes if it says in this question that my spouse is out all day long, when he comes home, I have no energy. So this happens in Corona, not in Corona. Like, how do we find the energy? Or what if we want to say no, and that's okay. But there's somewhere in the middle that there's something called obligatory, where a person may feel, well, you know what, okay. And I'd like to divide that into two separate things. Sometimes a person says, okay, and it comes from a very, very good place. It comes from a place like, I'm really not in the mood, but I know my spouse is. And I love them, and I understand that they need love, or maybe they need some healing, or maybe they need some self-esteem, because we know that intimacy brings self-esteem. So how the person is going to feel afterwards is really the measure. Was this obligatory sex coming from a good place or not? I think, there are times when someone says, okay, if I'm together with my spouse now, then they won't bother me for a few days. Or or that person did something for me and I owe it to them. There is obligatory from a good place and obligatory from a not such good place. And I'm sure it happens in Corona too, because behind closed doors, these are the feelings that we have. So I'm just encouraging people to take notice if that obligatory yes is something that really comes from their heart. Because if it doesn't, it's much better to say, I'm really sorry, sweetheart, maybe tomorrow. There's so much to say on this. I just wanted to say one more thing, that if this is a one-time thing or once an obligatory sex can be looked at if it's happening all the time or just once in a while. So keep that in mind, that it's okay once in a while. Of course it is. We're humans. And if we love our spouses, we love to give to them, even if we're not in the mood. But if it's becoming a problem that I'm never in the mood, so then there's something that we have to deal with, Corona or not. Okay.
If I could just add in there one other idea, is that I think sometimes when you say, is this our new normal? And you pointed out when you said that sometimes this could actually be everyone, not that Corona is our new normal, but it's normal for people to experience times where they're busy and life gets them, and people are working in the morning and the evening and they don't find time, and then they get at home at the end of the day and they don't have desire to be together. And I think that it's important to, point out that sometimes people don't feel desire just like spontaneously. Wow, I feel desire. I want to be with my spouse. But sometimes there's things that have to trigger that. So maybe, if their sex life is practically non-existent, perhaps they just want to sit there and cuddle together, right? Maybe the whole idea of like getting into the bedroom and, having a whole routine is like overwhelming and too much for them. But realize that, as Dr. Ribner had said in the beginning, that sometimes, sex is just about cuddling and touching and, I don't know, just giving a back massage. It doesn't have to be this whole massive thing that goes on. And maybe that would be something that sparks them to want to do more if they want to, or not if they don't. So I think it's also defining what sexuality is.
Just one note to add to what you're saying now, Judith, and what Lizzie was talking about before, and that I think for couples who have established a satisfactory sexual life over the course of time, there is, I think, a real sense of having pleasure from giving pleasure. And that is, you would like this to work out for the two. You would like both of you to sort of leave the experience feeling good, wake up in the morning and be able to smile at each other. And the capacity to enjoy the fact that you are doing something that brings pleasure to your spouse, I think, is an enriching experience. And if that's not part of what's going on, then perhaps that's something that needs to be looked at, because it is easily an additional level of potential satisfaction that both of these people can experience.
Can I jump in here for 1 second? I heard something so beautiful this week that Ayelet Buchnick said, that, a lot of times we think that desire is going to be natural and it's going to come, and if we love each other, we'll have desire. She said, but there are a lot of things that need planning, or that need us to focus a little bit. She said, we don't, and sometimes we think, oh, it's a mitzvah, so therefore, mikvah night, it'll just create the mood, but it doesn't always. And what Ayelet Buchnick said is, we don't ever come to Shabbos and be like, oh, it's 4 o'clock, maybe we'll just bring Shabbos in. No, we spend the whole week. Who are we inviting? What are we cooking? What's our menu? And at 4 o'clock, it is candlelighting time, and we're ready, and we greet it a certain way. And the same with intimacy. If we plan a little bit, if we think about it, we look forward, those things actually add. And it's not just, oh, it has to be spontaneous to be wonderful and have so much meaning and bring us satisfaction. It could also be that we actually think about it beforehand and are happy to plan toward.
And on that note, I do want to say, thank goodness Shabbos is not at 4 o'clock anymore. It's at 5 o'clock now, because we do like to have that extra time to be able to plan. And planning sexuality is something that for some people is extremely helpful, because like Naomi just said, we don't only have to plan. Planning the external is one thing, and planning the internal is something else. And I think we need to have a little bit of both. Planning the external might be making sure that dinner is ready, making sure that, you have, everything ready for the next day, making sure that your bedroom is clean and relaxing, making sure that you shower and light a candle, all of those external context ideas. We also want to sort of tap into our own internal planning and, setting ourselves up emotionally for intimacy and for vulnerability, because intimacy and especially sexual intimacy involves a lot of vulnerability. And in times of stress and stressful times, not Corona, I'll say it again, because it's important. In times of stress, we don't necessarily always want to be vulnerable. We hold on tightly to ourselves to make sure that we're holding it all together. And being able to prepare emotionally for the good kind of vulnerability can really be very, very helpful in terms of planning. And I think we've talked about that before, and when we talk about mikvah night and expectations about mikvah night, there are men that feel that there are very high expectations that for them to perform on mikvah night, women that feel that they're expected to be available and to be passionate on mikvah night, so all of these things apply to that. Also, preparing ourselves emotionally is really important. I also want to say something about the word obligatory. We chose the word to use because it's a word that comes up very, very frequently in all of our practices and teaching. Obligatory, as Lizzie said, can be seen as something that means, oh, I'm going to do this for you. I feel like this is part of my role as your spouse to satisfy you sexually, because we're in a marriage, we're in a relationship, we love each other, and that's the positive side. Obligation sometimes infers, it's your responsibility. It is no one person's responsibility to satisfy another person sexually. It's their own responsibility to be able to learn about their own sexuality, their needs, and how to communicate it. So I think that's something that's really important, and we can feel that we have an obligation to our relationship, and that we are in this together, and that we will discuss what we feel is okay, and what is desirable and pleasurable for us, and that's part of consent, which we're probably going to get into in the next question.
Just one point that I want to add to what Jody is saying now. This notion about feeling an obligation to satisfy the desires of our partners, I think there's the other part of that is there's an obligation also to create an atmosphere with our partners, so that desire ends up being something that comes from within the relationship, and not because one person feels that they have an overwhelming desire to achieve some kind of physical satisfaction. It's the creation of the atmosphere of the bonds, the emotional bond, that ends up, I think, being probably even more of an acceptable sense of obligation than the fact that one person feels the need to satisfy someone else's desires.
I just want to add one more thing too, and I hear this from a lot of couples, that they have different levels of desire. Like some want to be together more often than the other. And I think that we have to understand that men and women work differently. And there isn't just one way for men and one way for women, but there is a general exception, not a general rule, that women need 3 things to get into the bed. And that's either desire, which some people have naturally, or they can just get in there and say, okay, let's see how it goes. And then eventually they can be aroused. Or there's the woman that says, listen, I need time. I need to talk to you. I need to feel that you care for me. I need to get things off my mind. And then I'm going to, let's just cuddle and talk. And then I'm going to feel much better about us. And I think that timing between a couple of figuring out how much they can, well, where they are in desire, where they are in arousal, where they are in needing to connect emotionally, is up to the couple to figure out and learn each other's language. It's not just a physical language, not just speaking, but it's an emotional, and it's a touch language also. I think we need to learn what the touch does to add to all these different levels.
Very nice. Thank you, Lizzie. I just want to add in one practical point on that. I think that sometimes the answer for this question could also be based on like thinking out of the box. That, sometimes people are like, okay, I have no desire. It's the end of the night. I'm exhausted. So sometimes the answer to that would be, well, I don't know, maybe in the morning you will have more desire. Maybe set your alarm earlier on, and maybe the two of you could spend time at, 4 a.m. watching the sun, 5 a.m. watching the sunrise. Or maybe it's just about taking a nap sometime in the middle of the day, but like maybe just thinking a little bit out of the box, how to create that situation and how to create that environment. On that note, we also just got another question from one of the audience. So I'm just going to, Naomi put it up on the slide here. I'll read it from there. I'm nursing and have a very reduced desire for intimacy. I make an effort to be intimate with my husband, even though I don't really want to, but I really don't want to and say, but when I really don't want to and say no, frequently he'll push me until I say yes. When I try to address it, he brushes off and says, I could have said no. How can I address the way in a way where he can hear me? I think that's a really good question.
That's a great question.
Who would like to start that one?
I'm happy to start with that. I'm happy to start that one. If you don't want to have sex, you get to say no. You get to say no, and you want to make sure that you say it in a way that he's going to hear it. If he doesn't hear it, you say it again. So that's the first thing. I totally understand what you're saying about the nursing. A lot of times it's very common. You know, when you're nursing, not only you have a new baby, you're tired, you're up in the middle of the night, your body is being sort of taken over by this little bundle of adorableness and joy and spit up and poop. And a lot of times sexual desire will be reduced, and it's your body. So his body is not going through all of these things. So to be able to understand, I don't know if this is your first baby, if it's not your first baby, but learning a little bit about what it's like sexuality after baby may be a good idea to read some books. And if you'd like to sort of ask us afterwards, I'm sure we can all recommend some things. If he's not hearing you when you say no, it's important to bring up the topic, not when he's asking. So when the two of you are in a calm situation, when you have a few minutes to talk, and be very, very clear that yes, you understand that your sexual desire is reduced lately, and you want to be able to say yes, and you want to be able to please him sexually, and to give this to your relationship, and make it clear that you're going to, what will help you feel more sexual, and see if you can come up with some sort of a plan. If he continues to push you, then you need to be able to really set your boundaries and let him know that it's really important to you, that he understands where you're coming from and respects you.
And just taking it one step beyond that, if he really does ignore your no all the time, then you better get some help. This may not be something that you can deal with on your own. You may need some counseling. You both need some counseling with regard to this. It's a situation which we are familiar with all too frequently. And one should not feel the need to suffer in those kinds of situations. If you've tried the strategies that Jody has suggested to you, and you're still feeling that your position in this is being ignored, then get some help. We can talk to you about later in this program about the kind of help you might want to get to, and the kind of professional that you might want to turn to, but do not feel that this is something that needs to be tolerated to a level that it engenders suffering. There is no justification for that.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about the other side of the story. First of all, yes, it's true that women, when they're nursing, have less desire because they make prolactin, which makes milk, and that depresses the estrogen, which makes desire. So it makes a lot of sense. But it doesn't mean that a woman who doesn't have, that is nursing, can't get to that point of desire. It just means that she needs to give herself more time, certainly not to be pushed. I agree with all of you, anybody that pushes somebody to say yes when they don't want to, that's a no-no. But I just think that, there's some sort of, has to be some conversation between them about the understanding of it. He's feeling possibly a little bit left out. This lady has a baby. She's taking care of the baby 24/7. And sometimes men do feel like, well, hey, what about me? And this is up to a conversation between the two of them. That how can they make the time? How can they help her have some desire? What can they do to make them, to carve out that time? I think there's two sides to the story. And also we have to put into the possibility here, maybe there's a little postpartum depression, maybe there's on her part and his part, which there is such a thing. Men can have postpartum depression. So let's look at both sides, and anybody who's pushing is beyond. Now that's no. But if a husband is saying like, well, what about me? And she's saying, well, I'm sorry, I don't have any desire. So maybe they can figure it out. I think, people who have had children have figured it out. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to go on to the next one. My spouse the other night wanted to try something different in the bedroom. I wanted to say no. I acquiesced because they really wanted to. The problem is I feel really guilty about it. I can't get it out of my head. What should I do? Let's take this one. Jody, do you want to take this one first?
I will take it. And it connects, it's interesting how it connects to the question that was just posed by that we just talked about the ability to say no, and, what consent actually what consent actually means. You know, this person used the word, I acquiesced. That sounds like she did something that she didn't want to do milichatchila, that she was not comfortable doing milichatchila. We don't know if she's uncomfortable doing it because of religious messages that she got, if she's uncomfortable doing it because of cultural messages that she got, is uncomfortable doing it because it's just something that doesn't feel good for her. So I'd want to understand what she meant by the word, but by the word she or he acquiesced. And again, we're going to re-emphasize again that this is not a corona question. However, in times of stress, sometimes, this kind of things may come up more frequently. So if she or he, if they're feeling guilty afterward, if they're feeling dirty, if they're feeling unsafe, if they're feeling any of these negative emotions after a sexual encounter, then it needs to be looked at, and it really needs to be understood. What part of this does your partner really like? If there's something that your partner is really looking for and they feel really good about doing it, let's try to understand what those specific things are. Maybe there's another sexual act that you feel comfortable with that will also make your partner feel great. So maybe maybe this is information. Maybe you had this negative experience, you're not feeling good about it, and you're using it as information for future more positive sexual experiences, and that will include some sexual communication. So that's very, very important. If it is a religious question that you're uncomfortable with, then we encourage you to speak to a religious authority about it, because a lot of times people think that something is asur when in fact it may not be. And what's interesting here is, we think of newlyweds and what they learned and how they learned, but I want to open this up and think about people that have been married for a lot longer, or people that are in second marriages that may have learned hajachat chatanim, hajachat kalot many years ago, when it was much less common to talk about sexuality, and it was much more common to talk about counting in colors, and all the asur, when we didn't talk about what was mutar and what was wonderful and what was beautiful and what's pleasurable and what's all the different types of intimacy. So ask the question. If it felt uncomfortable, you want to look into it, understand what felt uncomfortable. Again, if it was a hard no and you felt that this was something that really crossed your boundaries, then that's something that you need to be able to make clear to your spouse. And again, if you feel that there's any type of force, then reach out for help.
Let me just also mention that I think asking for something different is not necessarily inherently wrong, but it has to be done in a manner that feels comfortable for both people. When we were looking at this question several days ago, one of us felt that the word guilty here perhaps is not necessarily what the spouse was feeling, but perhaps anger, that they were placed in a situation which they felt to be beyond their capacity to deal with at that moment. Being in bed, being naked, being passionate, maybe it's difficult at that moment to say no if someone does raise some other kind of option. And then in the morning, what do you feel? I mean, maybe you did feel guilty if the issue, perhaps, as Jody pointed out, might have been a halachic one, but maybe you're feeling angry because there was a piece of manipulation that you felt went on, because at that moment, it was very difficult to say no. And I think, again, recognizing what the exact emotion is that a person is feeling may go a long way to allow them to discover what it is they need to do in order to not have the situation repeat itself. We can't necessarily erase the history of this, but we can give them some sense that this doesn't have to be a built-in piece of their intimacy. One other point, and Jody mentioned the option here of speaking to a Rav. Be careful about this. So we've spoken about this, I think, in previous webinars, which is not every Rav is an expert in this. Not every Rav has, not only learned the halachos, but has sufficient life experience to be able to give an answer that people can live with. And also because this is so intimate and so personal, it should definitely be a Rav that knows you. It shouldn't be someone who is you call up anonymously. This is not the place for anonymous questions. This is a place for discussion. And the Rabbanim who do take this seriously you are able to speak to them, and they do have a sense of what may be appropriate for this couple at this moment in their lives. One other point, there's another point, but I'll bring it up in a later question. So.
Okay, so put my 2 cents in that I agree with everything you said. When I look at this question, I think of that sometimes there's the more fun partner, or the one that wants to do more experimental things, and the other one that is just happy with just the way things are. And it's not always so, doesn't always work out. It could, some people like vanilla, some people like chocolate, and some people like vanilla chocolate chip with cherries on top. I think couples have to discuss this and have to see what is the line that I'm willing to just have fun with you. Why is somebody not interested in doing anything different? What is going on between the couple that one wants to be more experimental and the other one is not? If we're talking about the reason to being able to consent is the bottom line. But I think that if this is going on for a couple that one wants more play and the other one wants just plain, then they need to talk about it and see, well, what can we do to make this more interesting for us? There is just so many things that are possible to do. Somebody asked someone asked me in the chat, how do they figure it out? How do couples figure out what's good for them? There's so many ways. After they talk, they can look up things online. They can look up things in books. They can look up. People know what they want. People work on these things all the time in their head. They just need to talk about it. What would be nice for them, and share it.
Also, sex therapists are not only available with regard to problematic situations. Sex therapists are available to give people some guidance, some ideas, some suggestions about what they might want to do to give some enrichment to the sexual life that they've been enjoying all this time. Sex therapists do that as well.
Yeah, we talk very, often with couples that, we, as sex therapists, we take couples through a process. And a lot of times part of that process is going to be how to enrich your sex life. And whether that's with, reading or watching or incorporating different positions. Some people feel uncomfortable looking up things online randomly, and we can help you find things in a way that will be more comfortable for you. And there is a lot out there. And I'm sure we all have some interesting recommendations for you, and we'd be glad to help out in that respect. There's one more piece of this question that I just wanted to make sure that we get to. And I'm sorry that I'm sort of like the downer again here, but when we're talking about this person in the couple that's done something that she or he does not feel good about, I want to address very quickly a theme that comes up frequently, where one partner, and I'm going to say it's very frequently the woman, feels like that at a certain point in a sexual experience, they become a vessel, they become a body, they become a cleave for their husband to feel sexual satisfaction and sexual release and sexual relief. And that's not a good feeling for many women. And that's something that I would also say really would require opening up to your spouse and talking about it. And if necessary, turning to a sex therapist, a sexual professional that can help with this, because it's not a good feeling to feel like, I've become a body and not a person. We're talking about intimacy. In Judaism, sexuality and intimacy go hand in hand, no pun intended. And there's so many ways that we can feel intimate with one another. There are so many ways that we can connect. And when we start to feel disconnection, then that raises a red flag.
Okay, one more little piece I need to add. Wait a second. One little thing is that that sometimes when somebody doesn't want to do at 20, they might be willing to do at 30. We change. Sometimes we think, okay, this is something that I'm absolutely not interested in doing. And later, as they mature in their sexuality, they might, want to ask themselves if the spouse is still interested in doing something different. Well, maybe at 30 or 40, they're more interested in, or they'd be willing to reconsider if it's something that makes them feel safe and comfortable.
Yeah, I'm just adding one tidbit there. I think it's also really important that a couple, like one spouse always has the ability to ask and the other spouse always has the ability to say no. That's part of the conversation. No one should feel guilty about asking for something, but on the other hand, you can't have a guilt for saying no. So if you're in a relationship where you feel comfortable to express that and the other person also feels comfortable, you're in a good place. So feel good and feel free to ask, but don't be insulted when the person says no, right? That's also totally possible. And the same thing also, don't feel bad about saying no. That's part of asking the question. Okay, and that note, we have a question that also just came in, more about Corona here. It says, during Corona, my kids are at home all the time. They go to sleep really late. I feel really awkward about having sex while they are still awake. What happens if they hear us? What happens if they knock on the door and the door is locked? We just end up not being together because I'm so uncomfortable. Do you have any advice? I don't know if this is about consent and obligation, but definitely about Corona. Good advice, knowing that the kids are always around these days, especially at nighttime. Yes. Who would like to start that one?
Well, I think, look, I mean, kids being around all the time is not necessarily unique to the Corona situation. I think all of us who have raised adolescents particularly know that they can float around 24 hours a day. And unless and until we have the opportunity in our lives to have a big enough living environment that we can have a separate parents wing, we're going to have to deal with that as an ongoing issue. It's the issue that we deal with from a broader sense about what is the meaning of tzniut in the context of an active sex life when you are in the environment that has a number of children around. What does that mean and how do we do that? We are advocating that, first of all, people should not hesitate to let children know that parents need some time by themselves. There is nothing that's going to damage them or cause them any kind of future sexual trauma by an awareness that parents do have an intimate life and they sometimes need to be by themselves. And that includes locking the door, okay? Doors should be locked. And if you don't have a lock on your door, then part of your immediate assignment is to make sure that that happens. So I think that that should be much more a positive aspect of what goes on. I'm just reminded of a family who told me they have 5 children, the oldest a 15-year-old boy, and the mother became pregnant and told her children. And the son looks at his parents and says, I know what you did and it's disgusting. Well, he might know what they did, but why does he think it's disgusting? In other words, why is there some hesitant about having positive messages about human sexuality, which allows people to become a lot more comfortable with that? And again, I don't think there's any woman who is parenting children who has not been challenged by how to get out of the house to go to the mikveh in a way that doesn't make this a matter of public discourse. And by and large, after a number of years, people are able to figure that out. You can work out how that is best done to the comfort level of everyone involved. But I think parents should realize that they do have the right to intimacy. That's an issue that's come up a lot in the literature lately, but people have the right to intimacy if they want it. In other words, if both of these people are desirous of an intimate relationship, they have the right to that. And they should feel that, whatever they do to make that work within the context of whatever's going on, Corona or not, that is a task. If they are needing some advice with regard to that, then there are places to turn. They will not be the first people who have confronted the situation. I also want to just add a point to what Judith raised before, which I think is critical in terms of being able to ask for something and being able to refuse. And I certainly agree with what Judith says. I think any couple needs to establish that kind of interaction between the two of them, that they both feel entirely free, entirely comfortable to ask for anything. And by the same token, each of them should feel entirely comfortable to be able to say no. But saying no also requires its own skill set. You need to be careful about rejecting an invitation or rejecting an activity and not rejecting your spouse. So that I think one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, if the request is made that we want to be together tonight, maybe this is not a good night, but if I know that you're interested, I'll make sure that I have a chance to rest tomorrow and we can better be together tomorrow night. Or I know that you're requesting of me to do the following activity. I'm not so comfortable with that, but how about if we do something else that I know we both enjoy? And it's a good idea to end those sentences with saying, and by the way, I really love you. In other words, there the rejection is not of the person, it's of the activity that's part of the invitation here. I think if couples can establish that level of communication, it will resolve many of the potential issues with regard to lack of understanding or perceived lack of sensitivity. And it also guarantees a level of consent so that that becomes an essential part of the couple's intimate interaction without needing to really think about it. It becomes built in after a time.
I just want to say, in the name of my guru, Dr. David Ribner, he forgot to say that people are very, very good at having relations very quietly, right? Isn't that what you always say? And I just want to say that whether it's Corona or and there's any other reason, I think sometimes people feel like because our kids are around, so just forget it, and they go into a cycle of having less and less relations. It could be because the teenagers are around. It could be because they're exhausted. It could be for anything. But we always have to keep in mind that, are we going to stay in the negative or are we going to stay in the positive? Are we going to invest in this part of our relationship, or are we just going to let it go? I don't think letting it go is positive, even though both may agree. When we stand under the chuppah, we agree that we are going to have a sexual relationship, and it is for the benefit of our life. It is our home is based on the kedusha of being together, and it is all that's Taharat HaMishpacha is all about that. But we have to keep investing ad me'av esrim on this, and whether there are difficult conditions, we still can figure it out. We can be very quiet, or we can find times that the kids are not around, or we can find places to be that are more private. I'm saying, in the name of Harav Borstein from Machon Pua, he always says, lashkia, lashkia, lashkia. Always invest, invest, invest.
I'm going to go from a Borstein to Modern Family and the lock on the door episode, which is one of my favorite episodes. We can put a lock on our door and our kids are still going to try to get in. And we know that. We can talk to our children and when we're not on mikvah night about mikvah, and we can explain it to them, and they will still ask us, where are you going with wet hair at 8 o'clock at night in the freezing cold? They're still going to ask us because they're kids and their brains leak. And that's okay, because we're adults and our brains leak sometimes too. But we understand that. We understand that they're children. We understand that they're figuring these things out, that the information that we give them will not necessarily be available to them at the times that we would like it to be available to them. Part of growing up is learning about healthy sexuality. And that may involve, knocking on your parents' door and feeling like, oh no, what just happened? That's okay, as long as it's, as long as we can have the ability to talk to our kids about sexuality in a way that feels comfortable for us and that gives them the information that they need. And sometimes you got to have a quickie, because that so-and-so is going to finish their Zoom, or so-and-so may come in, and that can become part of the fun. It can become part of the play. And it's okay that these things happen. They happen to everyone.
I think it's actually this conversation has mimicked one of the conversations that came up on the Kala Conversations WhatsApp group. There's a WhatsApp group of Kala teachers, and there was a big debate going on there about whether to tell your children that you're going to the mikvah. Now, I'm not going to get into that debate, but this really does, if a woman should tell her children that she's going to mikvah, perhaps that's going to signal what's going to come afterwards, and therefore, how do you deal with that? And I think that you guys have really addressed that point of trying to figure out, we have to talk to our kids about sexuality. They have to know about it, right? It's not something that we're going to wait and have a talk about, but we're constantly going to be speaking about it. On the other hand, Jody, you mentioned it's not right then at the moment, like, hold on, the door is locked. We're telling you what we're doing. So we have to find a time, not at the time the door is locked, to speak about healthy sexuality, but on the other hand, to feel comfortable about locking the door. So I think that that's also within that debate of telling kids about going to the mikvah. You have to teach them about going to the mikvah, but maybe not at that moment when you're going to the mikvah, or maybe yes, everyone debates on that issue. I think, did someone want to say one other thing?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell a cute, I don't know if it's a cute story or not, but I remember when many years ago, my husband and I were invited Friday night to this very famous rabbi in his Rebbitzins house for the meal. And there were a lot of kids around the table, and we had a very nice time, and it was good, and it was just lasting a long time. And then the husband just said to his wife, you know what, I think it's really time now to go to sleep. And she goes, okay. And she gets up and they just leave. And I thought to myself, well, that's a little strange. But the kids thought it was the most normal thing in the world, because that's what their parents did every Friday night. They just said, okay, good night. And I thought that that was a very nice example of teaching your children that parents can have some privacy. And they don't, we've done our thing. Now it's time, we need to be together. Okay, so I don't know what you think of that, but I thought it was nice.
For many, many years, people were assumed that Freud was correct when he said that children, if they ever came in unannounced and saw their parents making love, that it would be a traumatic experience for them. And in fact, it's not true. It's rarely a traumatic experience for the children. It's much more of a traumatic experience for the adults. And children really are not all that put out by something like that. It shouldn't happen. Doors should be locked. But if you forget for the moment and the kids happen to peek their heads in, it will not damage them for life.
Important point.
But they'll have a good story for life, that's for sure.
I know we're at the end here, but a question came in and they just want to know if there's time for it. So we'll go a couple of minutes here. And this will be our last question. But it says, if there isn't enough time, just kidding, I have to ask them the question. My husband is on call and emails and texts a lot for work when I'm in Nida. When I'm in Nida, I feel we are in a good place in terms of our intimacy. But when I'm in Nida, for some reason, when I'm not in Nida, I feel we are in a good place in terms of our intimacy. But when I am in Nida, for some reason, when I see him so busy with calls and the phone and texts around the clock, I feel emotionally shut out. I crave time with him and emotional intimacy, but it's never the same as when I'm not in Nida. I've brought it up in the past a few times, but at this point, I'm at a point of, why do I always have to bring it up? And why doesn't he want that too? What can I do? Who wants to address that one?
I'm happy to jump in, but yeah, Dr. Ribner, you start.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Can you put it on the screen? Put it on the screen again.
It's a great question. It's a question about mindset. It's, it really shows us how much the way that we think and the stories that we tell ourselves affect our desire and affect our attitude towards intimacy. The difference between the time that you're in Nida and the time that you're not in Nida in terms of feeling shut out, it's very, very much a mindset. What I would encourage you to do is to think about what you hear yourself saying to yourself, your own self-talk, right? So if you hear yourself saying, he's on the phone, he never has time for me, he never did, then try to see what happens if you switch that around and say, wow, he's getting a lot of work done now. And this is really great. Hopefully, we'll have some time together later. And maybe I'll, sort of like bring him a little cup of tea or something, or put a little note next to his computer and see what happens there. It's very much a mindset thing. I think it's wonderful that when you're not in Nida, you have this awareness of, intimate availability. That's wonderful. And I would try to see if you could see what would happen if you would switch the self-talk that you have inside of your head to something that would sort of encourage intimacy during during Nida, your emotional intimacy, your spiritual intimacy, your all the other kinds of intimacy.
That's great. I have nothing to add to that. That was excellent.
I also think that it happens the other way around too. There's
Mhm.
women who are working on calls and emails and texts. And, you know, and I think when people are working, honestly, you know, that when they're in NIDA, they feel like this is the time that I can do more work. And it's not because they're shutting out somebody. Maybe it's because they want to get a lot of work done. So when they will not be in a NIDA, there will be some more time for that. I mean, that would be the nicest scenario. But on the other hand, yes, we do have to talk to each other and tell each other, yes, I feel shut out. Let's when can we have time? And then to make that time, I don't see any other way around it. So good luck.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. I want to thank the speakers for their time, right? We've heard a lot of great answers to a lot of really important questions. Realize that there's no one size fits all, everyone in their own specific case. If anyone finds that they are having difficulties in any of these issues, all of our speakers here are available for further conferences. Realize that everyone is not alone. And basically we've all had our challenges and we've all come out stronger based on them. So hopefully we wish everyone continued health and we look forward to seeing you in our next session. Just remember the Eden Center is also sponsoring on March 16th in Hebrew on Zugiyut and Mikvah Bizmanim Shel Choser Vadaut. So March 16th is our next speaker here. You can see it on the program. Keep following the Eden Center to be updated on all the programming that we are running. We're really running some excellent things, so follow us at the Eden Center. Thank you all. Nice to see you all.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Everybody.
We will
Thank
send you
you.
all of the therapist's contact information so you can participate. And if anybody has any further questions, definitely feel free to contact us at info@theedencenter.com. And this is also the time to say that we're always open to volunteering. We're always open to hearing your ideas. This evening came out of somebody turning to us and saying, could you do an evening on? So the whole series really came out of that. But so we're always open to hearing and welcome your comments. And
Couples.
And thank you everybody for participating. And I want to say a special thank you to the participants really for putting everything together in such a beautiful and clear way. Laila Tov, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Laila Tov.
Thanks, Naomi, for giving us the opportunity too.
Thank you.
Okay, Laila Tov, everybody.